What's happening, Hardscapers? This is episode 355 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And on today's episode, we have returning guest George Urvari. You know him from Knowledge Tree Consulting, also from Oriole Landscaping. He's been a repeat guest on the show because of how much he's willing to share with us from his time in the industry. And today we get into a couple different topics here. One with my interview with Tyler Spears a couple of weeks ago. Tyler used to work for Oriole. He used to work as a designer, project manager, estimator, sales, in all these different roles. And then when he went off to work for his next company, he was only a designer. He talked about the pros and cons of each, what he enjoyed more. And I just wanted to ask George what his thoughts were. Have they experimented with this in the past, of having just specialized people work on specialized roles in the business, or to combine roles for employees? So we get into that in the first half of this interview. And then the second half, we get into communication, meetings with employees in the field, out of the field, and so on and so forth. So before we get into this episode, we do want to say thank you to our sponsors. Cycle CPA. If you're looking for bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for money off their services there. And if you're looking for a software to dive into this year, check out the How to Hardscape headquarters software, which will help you budget, estimate, job cost, time track, schedule, so much more. Forms. You can have employees fill out safety checks at the beginning of the day and so on, and have those on file. We have courses. You can create your own courses. You can use our courses for onboarding, training purposes. If you want to learn more about it, go to our website. Link is in the show notes, hthheadquarters.com. That stands for How to Hardscape, hthheadquarters.com, or just send me a message on Instagram at How to Hardscape. And without further ado, let's get into today's episode with George. Today we're joined by now sixth time returning guest George Urvari. You'll know him from Oriole Landscaping as well as Knowledge Tree Consulting. You've heard him on the podcast before. There's a reason why we have George back on the show for multiple times. As I always say, I always come away from these interviews as well as our in-person talks with lots of things to think about. So George, thank you so much for giving your time today once again on the How to Hardscape podcast.
Thanks, Mike. I'm glad to be back.
George, let's get started, because top of mind for me is an interview I did recently with Tyler Spears, who actually used to work for Oriole Landscaping. So I do want to dive into what he was talking about working for Oriole Landscaping and then going off to his next gig, which was at another landscaping company when he relocated. And he brought up the fact that when he was working at Oriole Landscaping, he was a designer, he was an estimator, he was this project manager, he was also what's the other one there, sales. So he was doing like multiple different roles, as he said. And then when he went to his next job, he was only a designer. So that company hired specialists, they hired designers, salespersons, sometimes the salesperson were project managers. I don't quite remember the spread, but they tried to hire specialists. So my question to you is, have you guys experimented with the idea of hiring specialists? Do you continue to hire somebody who can handle multiple roles? Do you train people up, if depending on their personality and what their specialty is, to slowly start to build these roles into what they do? I'll just throw that at you. Take it wherever you want. But how have you guys evolved from then, if you have, and if you haven't?
Sure. So I guess we'll start with estimating. I'll kind of work this project management estimating. So let's say I have somebody in the field that's a foreman and wants to move into the office. That might be one of the transitions. And they understand how things are built. It's pretty easy to turn them into an estimator, right? Like it's very easy. Then the next step is, are they good with clients? Well, they were already running jobs. They were already dealing with the clients. So they could be good. They could be great. So obviously, if you're selling people, client managers, that's what we call them, that would be a natural move, right? And then the other part is project management, which they were doing anyway on site. So the only piece that's missing is the design. Now, to learn to become a designer is quite a bit of school, and you've got to be good on the computers these days with AutoCAD and Vectorworks and number of the different software platforms, and you've got to be able to do 3D, and that is a slow learning curve. So the The person who is in the field moving up probably can do three, but not the design, in which case you would have to have a designer that's doing design, right? Now, so imagine it's hard to find somebody who's got all four talents: client management, design, estimating, and project management. Well, I can teach estimating. That's not a problem. Design is a very long process, very long process. And you also have to have an engineering mindset for that if you're a really good designer. So typically what happens is you have this person, they move up in the company, and you got this design gap. So you go to the different design schools, and you find yourself somebody who is coming out of design school, and you hire them for design. Well, what are they going to do? Well, they're not going to meet with a client. They're going to do base plans, and then they're going to start doing drawings based on the directions that you give them, right? And then, so the next question is, well, how do I get that person in front of people? Do they like people? Are they good with people? In our company, what we would do is we would have the clients come to our office, and then say myself and the designer would be in the office, and we would actually revise the drawings in real time for the clients. And you need to have somebody who's pretty good under stress, because it's like, move this, change this, make this bigger, make this smaller, delete that, right? And and so you have these designers that are very creative. Then there's another piece that falls into that design category, which is like permit knowledge. So you've got to know what permits you need, what zoning, all that other stuff. Now it's a lot easier now because we have a database of all the permits that we need and the links through the city to get to that, right? That wasn't the case before. You'd have to flip through the book, and they would change the rules, and it was a nightmare. So to have somebody that does all of that is uncommon, and it's usually skills based. I don't have all of the skills, so I have a gap, so I have to work around it. So therefore, I'll hire a designer. It could also be that you have these creative people and they haven't been taught to estimate. So you might have an estimator. And the best estimators are definitely usually more introverted, engineering minded people who are extremely meticulous and detail oriented. And so there's a conflict there between the creative and this engineering mindset. Sometimes you do get this weird hybrid for sure. But it really comes down to like, what skills does this person come with? And that will determine what roles they fill. The other thing that comes into play is you have owners that are afraid to have one person doing everything, because they're afraid that they're going to steal the client contact list. So they build these connections, they leave, and off they go with your great clients. So they try to break it up a bit so no one person owns the whole piece of the puzzle. So sometimes fear motivates who does what. So I can take a designer and turn them into an estimator. However, they may hate estimating. Regardless, I still need to come up with a tender form. So I did this design. What are we actually building and in what order, right? And now with AI and all of these takeoff tools and stuff, it's a lot faster. And all, of course, estimating program. I think you have one of those, Mike. That makes that process a lot less painful than in the past. So the other thing too is that factors into that is workflow. So let's say I'm a busy landscape business, and I have call it a client manager, so the salesperson. They meet with the client. They also then do the design. They then do the estimate. They do the project management. Depending on the workflows, they might be overwhelmed with project management, depending on the size of the job. Or if they're bouncing around like maniacs and they do lots of little jobs, that is a lot of designing, estimating. It's a lot different when you have bigger projects with longer lead cycles. That also influences who you have. You may also mix into that things like you're not design build, your design build and your tender build or bid build. In other words, you're pricing drawings that are coming from architects or from engineering firms, and you need somebody to bid that stuff. So your designer is not going to be thrilled working on someone else's design, doing the takeoffs and pricing it. So depending on your company work mix, the work dynamics, the size of the projects, the some companies they don't do small jobs at all, and in which case there's less running around for the project manager. So it really depends on who's available, what talents they have, and your work mix. And there isn't one answer for one company. It totally depends. You oftentimes have owners, like in my case, I could estimate. I couldn't design on the computer. I did it by hand, but that became irrelevant. But I could get somebody under me to do all of that. We call them, CAD monkey work, so to speak. And then some of them we would bring to meetings and we would see, hey, this person's got a talent with people. Let's let them go and see if they can sell some work. Okay. I can teach them to estimate, and the project management also you can coach, and they become a full stack employee. Um, so I don't know if that answers the question, but there's a mix, there's a variety. There isn't one answer for any one company. And when you get busy, my business partner and I used to hand off project management. So if I was low on design work, I would take over some of his project management. So we even have it where, we have designated project managers where the jobs are so big that they're now worrying about the aftercare. The real dilemma is the client experience. Am I dealing with you, Mike? Am I dealing with your brother? Am I dealing with your cousin? Like, who am I dealing with? And who's the one point of contact? So that's where, if in our case, projects that are tender build or bid build, we would generally assign a project manager, and that would be the point of contact, right? I don't need a designer. They don't need to know the estimator, and it really is a project manager. If it's a giant project, it might be the same thing where you have a salesperson design team, and then you hand it over to the project manager, and for the next year or 6 months, that person is that interface. But those people have to be very competent and have the ability to make decisions without always having to go back to the designer, right? So it's um it's a bit of juggling, and it's not one answer, and it depends on how busy, like all those things factor into it.
So I've got a lot of mini questions here based on what you've been talking about here. So first things first, when you're hiring somebody, let's say they are competent in one of those roles, and in Tyler's case, I believe that was design. How do you decide, or when do you decide that they might be competent in doing also estimating in sales? Like, when do you decide to start adding these roles? Are you trying to figure that out when you're before you hire them, have with a personality test or anything like that? Or is it, you know what, you're a designer, we'll start you off with design, and then we'll see, you know what, maybe this person could be estimator based on the development of them in the business.
Yeah, so there are people that are adapters that can do multiple things very well. There are some people that are one dimensional. I'll give you an example. You could have a designer that actually can estimate but drops the ball project managing. And also their workflow is so busy on the design that they can't keep up. So then maybe they didn't make that site visit or they didn't do that check-in, right? So we another solution for that is to have a team approach where you have a design meeting to review designs and estimates together as a team, which is what we do to make sure we catch errors before they happen, value engineer the projects, right? And it becomes a collaborative effort. So there's all kinds of, so it's tough. Like, I'm sorry, but landscaping is a tough business. And, then people quit. You find a good one and you find somebody who can design but can't estimate. So you got this gap where you have one estimator that's doing the estimates, but then there's way too many estimates coming because now there's more smaller projects, which means they've got way more throughput. Like, there's so many things, and your customers are waiting for the quotes and all that stuff. I do like to have everybody be able to estimate so that if we're in trouble, I can say, okay, hold off on that design because if we don't sign that next job because we didn't get the estimate out, that's the bottleneck in the pipeline. And by the way, we can check and see what you're doing before it goes out. So I like to have everybody do everything. The design's probably the hardest one. And um, if I had my choice, I'd have a vertical integration where they can do everything for sure. For sure.
So, how about figuring out pay for somebody that's taking on multiple roles, or even just like their job title? Like, what are they, a designer, estimator, whatever? How do you figure that out? Is it like you have a base salary and let's say it's a designer, they can only do design, but if they can take on estimating and then they can take on sales and they can take on project management, is it a multiple of that salary or whatever you're paying them that when they're adding on these roles? Or is it a matter of, you know what, you're working an 8 hour day? Each of these roles are equal in terms of wherever they are on that pay scale. 8 hour day is an 8 hour day. You're not going to be doing an 8 hour day of just design. You'll just be taking on other roles within that.
Yeah, so it's the latter, and also people get bored just doing one thing, so the variety is nice. And then to answer your other question about like how do you advertise for this role, that's an interesting one, right? So, are you advertising for a salesperson? Are you advertising for a designer? Are you advertising for a project manager? Or are you advertising for an estimator? So typically, if it's, let's say we're doing tender or bid build and we have like say half of our business is that, and I could actually afford to have a project manager that does that, I would advertise for a project management position, right? If there's a design sales component, then I would advertise for a designer, but I would list the roles and responsibilities not limited to this, and this, right? So it may be that you design for a year or two, then you meet with customers, then you do some estimates, and then you do some project management. And it depends on the size of the complexity of the projects and your learning curve and your past experience. So we had a guy that worked for us that was a mechanical engineer who had his own landscaping business, gave that up, came to work for us, and I had him, he could run the company in 8 or 9 months. Right. So, it was ridiculous how effective he was. And, he would come in on Saturdays just for learning sessions because he just figured like, I'm here, I want to learn as much as I possibly can. That is like the most uncommon thing. That it's actually a business consultant now, ironically. But it was interesting to see that, and all the landscape architect firms didn't touch him. So they referred him to a design build firm because he was a mechanical engineer, but he could do anything. And it was really interesting to see that type of thinking and approach. And so, yeah, we've had, probably 1,000 employees since we've been in business. I've seen all kinds of combos and mixes and what works and what doesn't. And sometimes it could be the person wants to start their own business, so they can do all those things, and they want to, hey, I can do all this. I'm gonna start my own business. So there's so many pieces. So in terms of the pay, great question. The pay really is kind of like what the market will bear at the end of the day. It's not like I get paid more because I do this, I can do that. As a matter of fact, if we have a slowdown, like we've had the last couple of years, the more skills you have, the less likely you are to get put to the curb, right? So, I can sell design and estimate and project management. No matter what you need, I'll be there for you. So that's sort of more of the approach. Now, when you get into much, much larger companies, so I mean, we have a designated estimator. Um, but when you get into much, much larger companies and you've got, jobs that are $2, $3 million and it takes you 3 weeks to quote them, you need a designated estimator. It's not like you're banging a design out in 2 days, then blowing the quote out in 6 or 7 hours. And, it's a completely different makeup depending on the size of the company and the type of work that you're doing.
In Tyler's case, he was hired, so he started his own business, just like a small one, and then eventually came to work at Oriole. So he kind of had that like design estimating experience and so on. Is that where you guys are kind of getting like those higher, whatever role that you would distinguish that as, like a higher level role where these people can do multiple roles in one, less likely to be moved on from in a downturn economy? Is that where you're finding these people? Is like, because he said that even Oriole was subcontracting him in smaller projects even back then. Is that the benefit to networking in that sense, like finding people to subcontract? Because maybe down the road they decide, you know what, business ownership is not for me. You've been a great person to subcontract work from. I want to come work for you. And that was in Tyler's case. But not just beyond that, like just like going to networking events. Is that been a beneficial thing for you guys getting talent into the business? Or is it like outward marketing and finding people that way?
Well, have you interviewed Daniel Carmaccia yet? Or
No, I have not.
No? Okay, so you got to write that one down. So Daniel had his own design build business, and he studied landscape architecture at the University of Guelph. And he actually hired me in consulting to help set up his estimating system and to coach him. So I coached him for a number of years. And he, uh, after a while, thought, man, this, his right hand quit, and it was just like it was insane trying to run this small business, doing the design, doing the like everything, and having one crew and the equipment and the trucks and the logistics and ordering materials and getting paid and all that stuff. So he decided that, you know what, I'm going to become a landscape designer. And I said, I want you to go get your stamp. So go get your landscape architect stamp. And so he's been out networking at the golf events, at the Creative Landscape Depot events, at the Landscape Ontario events, at the peer-to-peer network events. He's out there networking, and he's picked up enough business where he's got a thriving, viable business that's doing design build and or design project management for companies that do larger work that don't have in-house staff. And he's not cheap. He's really good. And the cost of subcontracting as opposed to carrying somebody is way cheaper. So he's found this niche, and it'd be a very interesting conversation with him about his journey. He's a phenomenal golfer. So one of the things I encouraged him to do was join a golf and country club to network. And sure enough, he, dropped his 20 grand for the membership and he did it. So he, an amazing guy that started out with a design build business, hired me for consulting, sold all his stuff, went straight into design only, and then now he got his landscape architect stamp, I think, last week, and now he's available in the market for people that want really good designs with full construction drawings, the whole 9 yards. He can represent your company, and what a great relationship, right? So yeah, networking. There's many different ways to skin the cat. You just need to know the pros, cons, and unintended consequences. One thing that's nice about having a vertical stack is, let's say I handle my business, the client has the same person, the same touch point. If I don't and I'm handing stuff off, when I hand stuff off, I might drop the ball, might not pass the information on properly, or that person's overwhelmed and I'm dumping on them, they can't handle it. So now my client has to wait. So I have very little control over juggling. There's one designer and three salespeople. In the spring, what happens, right? So it's a real challenge no matter how you organize it. And like I said, I've gone into companies and set up companies many different ways in terms of organizing them. And depending on who stays, who quits, some people are not as good at some things as others. Some people are great at everything. It's just such a crazy mix.
Yeah, I guess my question from that is how much should a business owner prioritize networking? Like I think back to another interviewee that you recommended, and you guys had an event with him with George Coito of Coiva Contracting, and
Yeah.
they took us around the job sites. Andrew there, same thing. He used to own his own business, eventually just wanted to get out of it and went to George, and now he's working at Coivic. Obviously from that networking aspect, he knew that George was the person that he kind of wanted to work for. Same thing with Tyler, with you guys. Like once he was done with his business, didn't want to do it anymore. Oriole was right there. He's worked with Oriole before and knew that Oriole was the company that he wanted to work for. So, how much should business owners prioritize networking, and at what point does that kind of come into play in a size of business where the business owner should be prioritizing that for the growth of their business?
Yeah, so let's talk about networking. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Koivic, George Coito Koivic. So he has um seats for the Maple Leafs. He's got, I think, golds and platinum seats for the Leafs. He's got a dinner table in the restaurant that's pretty much reserved for him. And all of his rich clients all go to the hockey game, either because they have their own tickets or because George gave them tickets. And they all meet around a table and reinforce that culture of how awesome is George, and hey, we all know each other and I should hire George. Okay. So I don't know how important that is to you, but that's pretty important. No? For me, I joined a golf and country club, and I'm hanging around with all these rich people and I play golf with them and they hire me for landscaping. networking is huge. I have people that are on hockey teams, and there's two sort of streams. One is um, I'm a coach, and the kids that play for me, their dad is the CEO of whatever, and they find out what I do and they hire me. Or you know what? I'm going to recruit my talent from the hockey team, and I generally look for defensemen because they're team players and unselfish, and I've got summer students, right? So networking, people that don't do that are in a little bubble and they're missing out. It's the definition of insanity to not network. You want to know what's going on, and you want to sit at the table where people are above your pay grade or above your intelligence. And if they like you, you're going to get business and better business, and you're going to learn stuff. So networking is, it's, if you ever become bigger and you're a CEO, networking is everything. That's what it is.
So then do those Leafs tickets, season tickets, or the golf country club expense, does that go into our budget under overhead expenses in our business?
So, interestingly enough, I can't write off my membership. So to join is about 100 grand. And every year I spend between 25 and 30 grand, and I'm not allowed to write it off. It's irrelevant though. Back in the day you could, but the CRA caught on to that one.
Gotcha.
And some of my buddies at the club who've been at the members for 30, 35 years, their companies paid for them to join the golf club to network. That's how valuable it is. Guess what? That's where you might. Um, Here's an example. I got you know, somebody that I like. I find out their kid's 22 years old and is studying blah, blah, blah at whatever university. And I say, hey, why don't you get your kid to apply at my company? And the dad's awesome. You played golf with the kid. Kid's got awesome character, and you can tell he's smart, and you get a wicked employee. Or you collaborate on projects. Oh my God, the collaboration that happens is insane. Or, you might get a stock tip about something, not insider trading, but the information you get is like off the charts. Or you can, be by yourself and in your little bubble, not knowing what's going around you and not take in all this stuff and not become a better person. So networking's huge.
Question popped into my mind about that, but I think I'll put it on the back burner for a future episode, maybe at some point. But
Sure.
because that's going to take us down a rabbit hole. But we want to take a break from today's episode to thank our sponsor, Cycle CPA. It's crucial to review your financial statements on a monthly basis so you can diagnose areas for improving your business's financial health early before they become significant issues. Too many contractors wait until the end of the year to review their financials as they file taxes, when it's often too late to take action to change the outcome. Cycle CPA not only handles bookkeeping and taxes, but they also ensure that you're armed with financial data on a monthly basis to make key business decisions. They offer benchmarking, cash flow forecasting, and assistance in developing targets for financial metrics. With their team of accountants specialized in the hardscape and landscape industry, they currently work with hundreds of companies in this field. Visit cyclecpa.com, and for $200 off, mention the How to Hardscape podcast. Now back to our episode. I did also want to bring you on today to talk about communication in a business. I've seen, people online talk about meetings and talk about how they have a lead hand or a foreman, whatever you want to call them, meeting in the morning before they roll out. They also have one at 3 p.m. just to see how the job's going. And in my mind, I look at that like it's too rigid for the industry that we work in, where they could be in the middle of something, or it's just taking production hours away from the field. And unless they're actually budgeting for that and knowing that they're pricing that into projects, they're losing hours in the field of a key contributor, or like I said, they're in the middle of something. They're very crucial, and like, how can I meet a 3 p.m. meeting with all these other lead hands in the company, and so on and so forth. I could go down many different examples of this, but what do you look at this as, like, meetings for especially people in the field who are doing work? Like, how often is that communication crucial? Do you leave it to those people in charge, of the lead hands, foremans, whatever, to just communicate on their own time about specific things? What are they communicating on? Lots of different kind of avenues we can follow, but I'll just leave it up to you, George, to take this kind of wherever you want.
Okay, I'll start with a football metaphor. Okay.
Sure.
Imagine I'm the quarterback. I get on the field and I decide that if I can run more plays, I have more opportunity to win. So I never have a huddle. We get creamed. We don't have a strategy. We can't examine the defense strategy, and we make all these mistakes. So we need to have a huddle, which is a meeting. We need to do it probably pretty every play. We need to recognize that, Johnny Smith is an unbelievable cornerback, and we might want to not throw it down the left side of the field. We might want to switch up our tight end from one side to the other, right? And we might want to do a running play versus or a short passing play. Like if you don't plan, you're going to fail. And so this work harder works like you can't scale that. You can't teach the skills, you can't transfer the knowledge. Part of the cost of your business is the transfer of knowledge. And guess what? It costs money to do that. And if you don't do it, no problem. You're going to be where you are 10 years from now doing the same thing, never having progressed. So meetings are absolutely crucial. It's whether you have a great agenda, whether you have a great playbook, whether you have a great coach, right? And you see those guys get together, they clap their hands, boom, they get in a position, they go. And it's not that meetings are bad, it's that bad meetings are bad. So like there are, depending on the size of the company, there are something like 26 meetings. I've mapped out every meeting for corporations, big and small. A small company needs 3 meetings, essentially. They need a meeting for the crews every day. So first thing in the morning, what are we doing? How are we doing? What are the goals? Afternoon, after lunch, what are we doing? What are the goals? And then a wrap-up meeting. Okay, how do we get ready for tomorrow? Simple. Get together. Who's doing what? That's part of delegating, right? Or I do it all myself. So there's the word delegation disappears. Then you might have a weekly meeting, operations meeting in the office, where if you're a smaller company, you combine sales and operations and HR into one compressed agenda, and you blow through stuff systematically so that you can collate and organize. Okay, so for example, in our company at Oriole, we've got, 10 crews and we need sod on all of them. Some of them only need 10 rolls of sod. So am I going to have the guys individually go out and pick up the 10 rolls of sod, or I'm going to have one guy pick it all up, have it in our yard, and then they can just take the sod in the morning as much as they need. So we need to coordinate that. There's actually 4 types of meetings, actually. So there's planning meetings, there's ideation meetings, there's coordination meetings, and then there's, I forgot the other one, but there's 4 of them, and you don't mix them. And so, if you had a soccer team, a practice is a meeting, which is the metaphor for what do we do wrong in the game? You never learn during the game, by the way. You learn during the practice. And you say, we did this wrong. Let's practice that weakness. So meetings are everything. And so they're the foundation of communication. And I think you want to talk about communication. So if I most companies, most people are horrible at communication. Okay. I can tell whether your company is going to be successful by how fast you respond to me. You're the bottleneck. You don't get back to people. And how come I can get back to everybody and you can't? Well, you have a bad method or you're apathetic and you don't care, right? Well, you need to be organized to manage the incoming information. So in our company, we kept it simple. There's no text, there's no phone calls, there's only emails, there's no WhatsApp. It's stupid simple. I can CC, I can blind CC, I can hit read unread. If you text me, I'll text you back. Email me, please, because I want to be in control. I don't want to be peppered by 5 different modes of communication. Then people leave voicemails. I have to call back, phone tag. It's brutal. We use calendar invites. I might send a tentative calendar invite for something. So communication, most people drop the ball, and actually it goes back to leadership, brutal leadership. So uh, great leadership is scarce, and communication is one of the fundamental pieces of great communication, and then correct delegation. So I delegate properly, which is a type of training. And so I'll give an example of like communication at the next level. Somebody walks into your office with a question and you say, it's fantastic. What do you think? I want you to think of 3 possible solutions. and I want you to make one decision and come back to me and tell me what you figured out. You come to me with a problem. I already know the answer. Can you figure it out? And if they figure it out themselves, you're empowering them to become leaders, which is a form of communication. So, nobody goes to leadership training, nobody. And so, that's one of the big things we focus on is creating great leaders. And the question is, do you want to be a great leader? Um, and then the culture of communication, I use the word culture very intently. I think I've mentioned this to you before, the word but. I think I've mentioned this before. I was working with uh, a group of CEOs, or about 10 of them, and the companies were worth between 100 and $250 million. And just for fun, I said, okay, can you guys see or promise to not use the word but? And when you do, you're all going to call each other out on it. Well, as I'm doing the presentation, within, I don't know, 30 seconds, a but comes out. None of the leaders called it out. So I pointed out, hey, you guys didn't call out the but because it's an excuse. Could we make sure we get on top of that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I got everybody to agree. As we move on, didn't happen. There was one guy who had an excessive number of buts. And then I said to him, probably toward the end of the presentation, I said, sir, am I driving you crazy calling you out on the butts? Because I've got you down at 32 butts or something like that now. And I do this exercise with all my clients. And he said, yeah, it's really irritating me. I said, well, that's what leadership is, because what you're doing is not right. And if you want to change the culture of communication in your business and have people that actually take responsibility, this can't continue. I'm sure he didn't like me, but there you go. I just used the word but. I caught myself. And it was the right thing to do, right? So changing communication is incredibly difficult because you're so habituated. Um, it's the difference between incredible companies and mediocre companies right now. There's a concept called RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, and resolved. So the idea is when I communicate to you and you take care of it and you say it's done, I don't need to worry about it anymore. Otherwise, was it done? Is he getting back to me? What's going on? And so, these things are all things that can be trained. Someone has to be a champion of the culture of communication, and they have to hold everyone accountable. So a lot of the companies that go into that adopt our email communication methods, they end up doing way better, way happier workplace, way better information flows, way less unhappy customers, way less frustrated employees waiting for information, wondering whether it's done. And so it comes down to people, culture, process, which is the magic triangle. And if you want to make your company amazing and not mediocre, then you have to step up on that communication front.
So lots of questions as usual, coming your way here. So when it comes to meetings, let's talk about people in the field. Rigid meetings, like it should be, you know what, we're meeting this day or this time every day, besides like that morning meeting, which is pretty easy to
Yeah.
rally people around. But like this time every day at some point during the day, all of our people from in the field are going to meet, whether it's like on Zoom or somebody goes around to meet with them. Is rigid meetings like the way to go for that, or should it be flexible based on what's happening in the field there?
Okay, well, let's break it down. So there's a meeting for all of the teams, the crews. There's a meeting for all the crews that can be at the shop. So I go in and I do what's called an observation exercise. I often watch companies and document what happens. So one company I went into, I was watching them do their meetings, and they would go through each crew, and each crew would have to wait till you're done with each crew. And I'm saying that's crazy. What we should do is organize it so that we have the overall company information. Hey, this is for everybody. And then what we'll do is there's a queue of crews. Maybe we split it up so that Tuesdays and Wednesdays we do the first two five crews on Tuesday, the other five crews on thing, and we do the company wide thing each time. So same story, same message, right? Might be rah rah culture, rah rah this went wrong, rah rah change this, we brought this new piece of equipment, whatever it is. And then the crew that's furthest away gets done first, and then they leave. And the goal is that we're going to be on site for 7. Then there's another type of meeting. So that might be or once a week or once a month, depending on what you require. No more than is required. Then on site, you're going to have a safety meeting. like what are we doing today meeting. That's 5 minutes, a 5 minute quick agenda, same time, 5 to 7, right? You got to have lunch, right? Well, after lunch, guess what? At 12:30, from 12:30 to 12:36, we're gonna have a little mini meeting to get organized to set our goals for the afternoon and knock this off. And at the end of the day, or you might have a break. At the end of the break, we're going to take another 5 minutes to go, hey, what do we need tomorrow? What do we need the next couple of days? Let's get organized, right? Those are mini meetings, and then there's sort of so you got to have an agenda, and you can't waste time. And we have a thing called a BS NBS code. So in every agenda question, there's a little tag that you can press. And if it's NBS, it's no backstory required. It's yes, no, today, tomorrow, never. That's it. Backstory required. I need to know some reasons for what happened. And so, if you get this stuff right, you don't think the military has meetings? Are you kidding me? Where's the training happen? Where's the information transfer happen? Just ad hoc all over the place? You're interrupting me. So meetings really get the whens organized. They get the whats sorted, right? Sometimes they get the hows resolved, right? And they ideally would transfer the why so that you create other leaders. It's the how that's the problem. Most people get it completely backwards, or they have a preconceived notion meetings are bad. No, no, bad meetings are bad. Great meetings are great. And great meeting leaders are great. And I want to build more of those. So people, culture, process. So the companies that want to go to another level have to learn how to do this stuff and then practice getting good at it.
But George, people hate meetings, right?
I hate going to the dentist, so I'm not going to go. I hate a lot of things. I hate doing bookkeeping, so I'm not going to do my bookkeeping. Like it's an excuse. And it's also, yeah, but people hate. Yeah, but. Okay. Well, how do we make it a good meeting? You've never been to a good meeting, so you wouldn't even know what that looks like. So, of course, it sucks. It's like going to the dentist and your dentist sucks and he doesn't inject you with enough painkiller and it's a bad experience. Well, let's make sure that we pinch the gum with a certain technique and then put the needle in so we don't feel it, and then wait to check to see that it's worked before we drill gently. You feel anything? No, no, no. Believe me, I've had some bad dental experiences. And then I won't be as afraid to go to the dentist. So it's the how. We got the hows wrong. It's the what is correct. It's the how and whether you're going to ignore it or not. So do you want to build a big business? You want to build a turnkey business? You want a business that works without you and you're not going to have meetings? Good luck.
I set you up for that question because I've seen what you guys have created with like these are the meetings that you need, and it's no BS, and it's very, very it makes people, I guess, like there's no wasted time in your guys' meetings that you've established. So people like there's a purpose to them. It's not like somebody's sitting on a meeting that there's no purpose to them being there. So
Right.
I've seen what you guys have there.
Well, Mike, even like the first thing we handle is HR. Are there any HR problems? If there's no HR problems, we have an HR person. Some people don't. They're no longer in the meeting. They're gone. They don't need to be there. If we got HR problems, we resolve that and then they leave. They don't have to sit through the other stuff. If I'm doing finance after HR, okay, HR, then finance goes. Do I need finance after that? No, I don't. They're gone. So I'm left with the operations people and the sales people to coordinate the workflows, right? Inbound work and who we're going to assign it to, and if there's any other things that we need to resolve. Boom. And then they're gone. The meeting ends. It's like chink, 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 regimented.
Okay, a couple more questions here, kind of off base, but somewhat related. Do you compensate people for their phones or provide work phones to certain people in the business?
Yeah. So the way it would work is if you can't afford, everybody has a phone now. So that used to be an issue. If you can, back in the day, if you couldn't afford a phone, we're going to buy you a phone. I can't make that the bottleneck to why we're not communicating. If you don't have email, we'll set it up. If you don't know how to use email, we'll train you. I take away all excuses. There are no excuses. Can I afford $300 a year? Absolutely. It's pocket change, but poor communication cost me thousands and my reputation.
I've heard this before from, I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Ferriss, where just like taking decisions off his plate as a business owner, he provided like if you could make a decision that doesn't cost the business X amount of dollars, say like $500, just make the decision. It doesn't have to come up to me. Do you guys have some sort of decision making process for certain levels in the business, like if this is going to make the client happy for amount of dollars that it's going to cost the business, just make the decision? Or does it kind of get filtered up level by level based on what those kind of decisions are?
Okay, well, I'll give you an example of how we work around that problem. So the constraint is money, right? This is going to cost the money if I do this one way or the other, right? So the first thing we do in our sales process, which is communication with the client, is just say, if you want any changes, it's going to be time and material. Here's the rate. It's less than our regular rate. And when you want that change, the foreman is going to clock in to change order or to T&M, and you're going to get billed for it. Do you have any objections to that? No. Okay, there we go. Just solve that problem. I communicated to the client in a meeting that I had to tell them what the process is going to be, so it doesn't cost me any money. If it's a design change where I have a designer and I have a project manager and there's a conflict on the intent, another solution to that is to have a weekly meeting organized with the client designer and the project manager at the same time to go over any potential changes. So it's not being peppered all the time. And we're going to wait till Tuesday's meeting to resolve that. So we're going to have a project meeting on site and even the foreman might be there. So, and it can be virtual. But the point is I need meetings. I can't have random crap derailing me all over the place. It's a disaster. So meetings, yes, meetings, the right kind of meetings, the right way, not bad meetings.
So if somebody signs up for your consulting service, George, do they have access to how Oriole actually does meetings to kind of implement that into their business?
Yeah, so we walk people through. First, what we do is we do a SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunities, threat analysis, on essentially 9 categories of business. I've gone through this before. And then we assess what your biggest problems are. There's macro problems, massive systems problems, and there's micro solutions. And then we give you the tools to solve the problem and the training to fix it. Some of the bigger ones might be, if your chart of accounts is a disaster and setting up your new books and moving to QuickBooks Online, for example, that's another session and it gets resolved. So everything's sort of problem based. And then what's the solution, right? Problem, solution. And every single question has a solution. How do we do it? The question is, did you get trained on it? And then the next question is, are you going to stick to it? Because it's very easy to abandon stuff. So that's why we try and keep it simple. We really focus on 3 major urgent things and 3 important things. That's it. We do no more than that. And then when we trust you and you've got it down, we'll move on to the next things. So when you do consulting, guess what? It's a meeting with your team in a session to go through your stuff to learn how to fix it.
So meetings are good. George, where can our audience find out more about you? Where do you want to send them to? Where they contact you if they want more of George in their life?
Sure. So it's George at ktc.biz, George at ktc.biz, and just send me an email. That's probably the best way to connect with me. Let everybody know it's the How to Hardscape podcast that we got connected. I've actually picked up a few clients from your podcast now, and my consulting challenge so far, I'm 2 for 2. 2 people took me up on it, and both of them hired me back twice. So that's kind of cool. I haven't failed yet because the deal was if I suck, don't pay me. And what's the worst thing that can happen? You waste a day of your life, and I get fired, and you learn something. So.
And we're gonna have those 2 clients on a future episode, talking
Yeah,
about what they went through, what they experienced, and that'll be a good one.
yeah. And I'm looking forward to, again, having some of the clients that I'm doing work with on your podcast. So Daniel's going to be a great one. Man, he is an interesting cat.
Awesome, awesome. Is that challenge still live?
Oh, yeah.
Yes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like worst case scenario, I don't get paid. So what?
And information is going to be in the show notes. KTC has been a sponsor of the podcast, and I've sat down with George multiple times. He's amazing, as my dog is barking in the background here. But George, thank you so much for your time and being on the How to Hardscape podcast, and we're looking forward to that next one here.
Thanks, Mike. And for those of you that are first time listeners, There is such a wealth of knowledge that Mike's collected over the years with all of these episodes that he's done. There's so much learning to be had that I share with other companies that I've learned on your podcast. And we're so grateful because you really make the industry better. So that's kudos to you.
It's all because of our guests and especially having you back on multiple times, George. So I thank you for that.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast episode. You can click the link in the show notes to contact George from Knowledge Tree Consulting. Or if you have questions about today's episode, you can also reach out to them on Instagram. Join KTC is their Instagram handle. And while you're there, send me a message at How to Hardscape. If you found this interesting, if you have more questions that you would want answered, if you have topic suggestions, if you have guest suggestions, you can send me that there. Ratings, reviews always help. Spotify, Apple, wherever you are, those always help the podcast. And I thank you to everybody that has done that or shared the podcast, liked, commented, subscribed, whatever. I really do appreciate that. And before we leave, we want to say thank you to our sponsors. Cycle CPA, if you're looking for bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for money off their services there. And we look forward to meeting you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.